I'm going to tell you today a story about Sarah and how we get trapped in our Lenten promises. During the last 2 years that I was at the University of Washington, I rode the bus. And Sarah rode the bus at the same time. But Sarah ignored me. For the first 2 months or so of being on the bus, Sarah completely ignored me. You see, Sarah had somewhat of a severe mental delay. Yet she would always wave and try to get the attention of whatever boys she found the cutest. The first 2 months, she ignored me. I know that she was waving at the cutest boys because I paid attention. I was trying to see who was she targeting. And always when a handsome guy got on the bus, I knew Sarah was going to wave at him, but not me. I'm not going to lie. It hurt that I didn't make the cut. It was a little disappointing. She never once turned my way. But then one day, I don't know if I got a new haircut or if I was just wearing a nice shirt or everyone else on the bus was really, really ugly, but she waved at me on that day. I waved back. She giggled behind her head and then motioned for me to come over. And I knew, Sarah knew that I was irreproachably beautiful. Made me feel good. So that, at least that's the discussion I had with myself in my head. I didn't ever tell anybody about Sarah, about my interactions with Sarah. I kept these for myself. Over the coming months, I would get to know her a little bit better. She would hurt her hand, and I would put a Band-Aid on it. She'd spill her purse. I'd help her organize it. I would do lots of little things. I would help her out in whatever way I could. But I never told anyone about it because to me, this was more of a good deed rather than a relationship. And this is not something that I'm proud of. But that's how I looked at it, as a good deed that we should keep in secret, like our gospel tells us. And then came the eventual day when I screwed everything up. That's usually how my sermons go, in case you haven't heard. Before this day that I screwed everything up, Sarah talked almost non-stop about this upcoming field trip. Where they were going, what they were doing, how it was going to be the most amazing thing that ever happened. And she regularly asked me if I was coming with her. I made some lame excuse over and over again. But then that fateful day of her field trip and my colossal screw-up came. I got on the bus as usual. Sarah saw me, she waved me over. She was very excited. She said that she had written me a note just for me. And so I quickly put it in my pocket because good deed, secret. But I was so excited to read this letter, I couldn't wait until I got off the bus. And so when I got off the bus, I tore it out of my pocket and I immediately realized what it was. It was her permission slip for the field trip she had been talking about. For a second, I started after the bus, but realized it was hopeless. I didn't really know where she was going, and I didn't know how to track her down. I had failed Sarah so completely, and all because I didn't want the left hand to know what the right hand was doing. I was living the letter of the law, but not the law that commands us to love our neighbor. See them not as good deeds to collect, but as people deserving of our love. I'll tell you the good news. They let Sarah go on the field trip, so you can forgive me. Even without the permission slip, they let her go. But the bad news is that I'd spent nearly my entire early years' life doing selfish good deeds. Good deeds with no connection. Good deeds that were all about me. Good deeds that were all about this letter of the law, but ignored our call to love our neighbor. This misadventure with Sarah is our usual Lenten journey. It's about quietly shutting down and shutting everyone else out in order to see to our religiousness. It's about spending time alone in the desert, not necessarily walking with our fellow traveler. It's not being a hypocrite, while kind of being a hypocrite, and ignoring those that we are called to love. Because of this time with Sarah and my other secret good deeds that I have collected throughout my life, I am not one of those give up something for Lent type people. I'm going to take something on. Like pay better attention to your neighbor. See what your neighbor is going through and ask them about it. Quitting for me is easy. I just stop doing something. Taking something on is hard. We spend most of our lives in the desert of our faith. We live Lent every day. That's the world that we live in. We no longer have to take this adventure on our own. We live that. We see that every day. But our calling is different. Our calling is to allow ourselves and others to flourish in the desert. And that brings us to our season of growth, our Lenten devotional, our Lenten goal. Now, as a Lutheran, I have struggled with the meaning of life. I know that you all have struggled with the meaning of life, but Lutherans have a particularly difficult time answering why, answering the meaning of life. For most Christians, the idea is that you need to spend your time earning it. You need to go out there and get as many good deeds as possible and collect them all. So that when you get to the hereafter, you can say, okay, God, there were 1,500 bad things, but I did 1,501 good things. So you let me into heaven. I earned it. That's what most can throw back. It's a nice little system. It makes you feel good. It makes you go out there and do things. The problem is we can't do that. We know the truth. Jesus died for all. Jesus did the work. Jesus accomplished all of that. We cannot earn it. We cannot pay for it. God has given us everything. And only Jesus could take us the rest of the way. So if life is not about collecting good deeds, then what is this treasure in heaven that we are storing up? Where rust and moth cannot consume. When you ask the right question, the answer becomes fairly obvious. But it took me a long time to find the right question. And it's this. What of your life survives death? Hear it again. What of your life survives death? If it's not wealth, then life cannot be about accumulation. If it's not awards, then the meaning of life cannot be some sort of earthly success. If it's not good deeds, then the meaning of life cannot be stealing permission slips from good girls on a bus. It has to be something else. What of your life survives death? Your relationships. The relationship that you have with yourself, the relationship that you have with God, and the relationships that you build with others over a lifetime. That's it. That's what you bring with you. Relationships you build not from running from the truth. Relationships you build not from showing everyone else how much better you are than them. Relationships you build by spending time together in the desert when those things don't go right. Relationships you build by revealing the true you, by allowing others to see the true you, and by allowing other people to be their true selves. That is the true Lenten journey, not what we've turned it into. We have fashioned Lent into a truly darker time where we cannot even utter words of joy. You know what word I'm talking about. It's the A word. And I'm just going to say it. Hallelujah. I can already picture the true Lutherans coming up to me after the service. We have turned Lent into this place where we cannot even speak of joy. But that's not the meaning of Lent. Lent has become this quiet, secret, looking after yourself type event. But how is that a Christian message? How is that what Christians should be about? Don't get me wrong. Lent can be a time where you allow yourself to grow and help others to grow. But why should that come at the expense of others? At the expense of your neighbor? But let's be honest. Lent should be a time where we're honest. Hell is other people. Sartre said that. And it's unmistakably true. If you only allow people to exist as you imagine them. If you only allow people to exist at their best. If you only allow people to exist at their worst. We are called into the nitty-gritty of life by people in constant need of being forgiving and being allowed to forgive. Nature abhors a vacuum. So does faith. It's nearly impossible to do faith alone. Now I know what you're going to say. Jesus did it. Lent is about Jesus. Jesus went for 40 days, spent time alone. Let me save you a lot of heartache and worry. You're not Jesus. I'm not Jesus. Nobody you see walking around is Jesus. We're not Jesus. We are the Israelites in the wilderness. For 40 years they wandered. Jesus did it in 40 days. We need 40 years. We are wandering together. We need to come together. We need that community to drive us to that place where we need to be. We even need the people we don't think we need. I've had a number of enemies in my life. I used to think it was pretty neat to have enemies. But I always knew what they were thinking and why they did everything that they did until I spoke to them. We need to take the time to listen this season. We need to take the time to be heard. We need to take the time to nurture. We need to take the time to grow. Lent is not necessarily about sadness or quiet or being alone, but it's about setting aside time to grow in all ways possible. However it's possible for you. It's about creating an oasis in the desert. A reprieve from the chaos of our daily lives. Now some do this through studying, swaying a palm tree in that oasis. Others need to gather together in the tent and tell those belly-quaking stories that warm their souls. There's no one way. But I do know this: Lent is not about sadness, but about growth. And spring is upon us. The rain is blowing. Seeds are going in the ground. The growth is coming. Growth in the desert is not a mirage, but an absolutely true possibility for the people of God. Amen.
Amen.